to the 18th episode of Join Us at the Table. My name is Ben, and I'm here with Izzy Sober, and today we are with Marisa and Lindsey. And Lindsey and Marisa are currently developing a docuseries called Point of Origin, which discusses the provenance of the products we consume and see every day. Point of Origin also introduces the faces and stories behind the real-life processes of food production. In addition to being talented storytellers, Lindsey and Marisa are also young alumni of Santa Clara University. We're very happy to welcome you here to join us at our table. And to get us started, would you mind telling us about yourselves and how both of you got involved in both the creation and research for this docuseries?
Yeah, I can kick us off. I graduated from Santa Clara in 2016, which, it was a long time ago, I guess, right? 5 years since that point. But yeah, after college, I did a Fulbright in Morocco, got involved in social entrepreneurship, and through that work in social entrepreneurship, started working in agricultural development and supply chain sustainability. And it was one experience in Ghana that kind of kicked all of this off for me. I was working for a Ghanaian tech company, building solutions for smallholder cocoa farmers on the ground, and then also working with larger companies sourcing from those smallholders. So Barry Callebaut, Mondelez, Hershey's. And I think it was being in between those 2 points of the supply chain where I realized there are some gaps that, tech solutions can't bridge, that run deeper and that need education, and not just for those 2 groups, but for our wider communities. And so, I just realized even for people working in the industry didn't have the visualization they needed of their supply chains. And we can't expect people in the industry to have that, how can we expect the wider public to have that? And I think documentary, film, TV is a great way to build those bridges, and help put that education out there. And that's how this docuseries idea came to be. How do we show people the human faces, the hands, the lives behind the food that we eat every day?
And I ended up joining this after learning a lot about food systems with CFIE. Actually, I was a researcher back in the day with Santa Clara. And like Lindsey, I did a Fulbright after college and was working on agricultural supply chains in Ghana. And after I came back from that and was figuring things out, Lindsey called me up and said, I'm doing this really cool project about food supply chains. Do you want to help me out? And this idea behind showing people supply chains is an issue that I had seen in all of my work, whether it was with CFIE or with Ghana, and it really struck a chord of this is something that we need out there. And I was really excited to be able to join in on that ride.
That's amazing. It's so inspirational to see Santa Clara young alumni take, what they've learned at Santa Clara and take what they learned after Santa Clara and create such a meaningful and impactful project. So we definitely look up to you guys and love to see that what you guys are doing and pursuing. I guess let's jump on into the docuseries and to hear, we would love to hear more about what your first topic is in this docuseries and why you decided to choose to take on that topic.
Yeah, I think, so we sketched out a total of 14 episodes looking at various products and communities to which those products had a really special tie. And so we had a really great suite of episode options. But I think when you're looking at something like this and kicking it off, you really have to go to the folks who are at the center of the issue, and you have to be on the ground with them, talking to them, hearing their story and their stories. And, it started out as a bit of convenience. I think when you're in the middle of the pandemic, you can't travel. It's not like I can go to Vietnam and, talk to coffee growers there. It's just not possible right now, or not as safe. And so, almonds in Central Valley, it was one of our episode ideas. And I think it was the most convenient one to work on during this time. But I think we've definitely moved past the convenience phase. We're digging into some really great storylines there. And I don't want to give too much away, but I think there's a huge story of people who feel like they haven't had a chance to share their story in the way that they want to. And there's a lot of perspectives on the table in the Central Valley, people close to industry and people who feel like they've been affected by it.
That's that's amazing, especially focusing on, I guess, the stories of the growers and their perspective. I think it's really important to sort of have that voice in the mainstream when you are talking about the food supply chain. And in your research so far, have either of you stumbled upon any sustainable efforts that growers have put in place to address the challenge of water usage in almond growing?
Yeah, that is something that definitely comes up in pretty much every single conversation we have. Several of the articles that were published in 2014 about almonds and water have kind of been thrown out by certain people, calling them, these are the infamous articles that took down our industry and painted us as villains. So this is definitely something that we talk about a lot. And what we've been seeing is partially because of this consumer pressure and partially because of several California water bills that have been passed in the last 5 years, there actually are more pushes towards sustainability work. So there's a lot of work around how do we replenish groundwater. A lot of this is in the development stage and the question stage of how do we do this effectively. But it is something that I don't think we've had a single conversation that it hasn't come up in, whether or not we ask about it. So it's obviously top of mind, and everyone knows that when you think of almonds, you think of the sheer amount of water that goes into them. And there's a lot of conversations about why that is and what happens and how do we understand that food takes resources to produce, and all food does. And all food takes a lot of water. And how do we change this conversation that understands the different resources that all of these things are pulling from and understand how to do that sustainably, but that it still is a necessary part of feeding our global population.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's a part of every conversation that you do have with the people that you have talked to so far, because it is such a big issue. And I thought it was so interesting how you mentioned that they were painted as villains sometimes, but the sustainable efforts are there. And so I would love to hear more about how does it benefit or impact consumers, both consumers and growers, to be able to visualize this food supply chain.
I think there's a feeling among growers that a lot of what we've heard in many of our conversations is that they don't feel heard or seen. Marisa recently attended the almond conference, and there was also, I think, that sentiment expressed there from growers who were also attending. And, I think there's only so much you can get from reading something about an issue. And when you listen and kind of present the opportunity to share that story, there's always a lot to unpack with a narrative, but having that starting point of sharing the story and sharing that those different perspectives is a powerful starting point. So I think that in and of itself is really the power of providing visualization to this supply chain. And I think, not many people know that this industry is really fueling California's economy in a big way. And knowing that in of itself, I don't think the average person thinks about that when they pick up a package of almonds. And really giving people the power to know what's going on and giving opportunity for growers to share their story, I think, is where that can come into play in a great way.
It's definitely really important to make sure that all of the voices of the people that are behind this, I assume, multi-million-dollar industry in California, because those are the people that are going to work every day, making sure that all the almonds are properly harvested. So it's definitely great to have those voices included when we are talking about the almond supply chain globally, but also specifically to within the Central Valley. And you touched on it a little bit, just sort of the community level approach. But why is taking a community level approach so important when trying to be transparent? This could be transparent with the research that you've done for the docuseries or just with the docuseries as a whole.
I think you can't really get the true story of the community unless you go to the center of it. And it's funny, again, kind of bringing it back to almonds. I feel like this has again been a recurring theme of our conversation. We don't enter enter these conversations with a predetermined narrative or a predetermined stance. And I think that's allowed us to operate on a plane of mutual respect. And I think that's saying a lot in an industry that has typically had, some wary relations with the media, and us being able to have the opportunity to come to the community and talk to the community and bring cameras into the community. We've only been able to do that through this community level approach. And, I think you have to ask challenging questions while doing that too, critical questions. And you have to give respect to the people you're asking those critical questions to. The critical questions is something they're not used to. But through asking those questions, through digging into that narrative, it is showing them respect in a way, and it's showing the viewers respect as well.
And to add on to that, I think that coming at it with a community-based approach really helps with the storyline telling of getting to our overall objective of helping people understand, where does your food come from? Because food contributes to, the food value chain as a whole contributes to about 30-ish% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Climate change is something that people are thinking about a lot right now, but that is really abstract. What isn't abstract is thinking about how the almond that you buy in the grocery store, the apple you buy in the grocery store, passes through so many people's hands to get to you. And humanizing that and understanding that, like, it may be a big emitter of emissions, but there's reasons for that. And some of the reasons are valid and some of them need to be changed. And so it's one way to make this kind of large, really hairy, complex topic feel more approachable and something that people can relate to and want to take action on.
That's amazing that you guys are making such a big topic more approachable. You're humanizing it. I think that a community level approach and a grassroots approach is so crucial to make that happen. But what has been an unexpected obstacle that you have faced while taking this grassroots approach to researching and filming?
Yeah, I mean, I think just that, you nailed it on the head. Where Marisa just said we're tackling such a big topic, and I think Marisa and I both have backgrounds in environmental studies and science, and so we know the context for some of these issues that we're discussing and grappling with, but the average viewer might not. And so figuring out how to explain supply chain sustainability, the relation of carbon to your food, what carbon has to do with climate change in general, figuring out how to explain these things, is hard. And one thing that we've done to innovate around that is integrate animation into what we're doing. And so we've been testing it a lot out on our social media pages, and it's going great. And it will definitely be a key part of the point of origin episode structure. I think when you're working on something like this, when you're explaining context and concepts to people, you could throw photography or some B-roll at it. But I think animations helps convey that learning and it in a very engaging way. And so that's how we're kind of innovating around that obstacle.
It sounds like both of you have taken a lot of independence when it comes to this project, not only in choosing how you decide to conduct your research, but also, as you just mentioned, choosing to include animation in your project as well. And I'm sure that among Santa Clara students, there's a lot of students interested in creating their own docuseries or even just working independently within the field of sustainability. And we'd love to hear if you have any advice for those students about how they can enter this space and how they can be independent workers within the field.
It's funny. I think all four of us have done some research and studies in social entrepreneurship. And I was just doing a presentation with Marisa the other evening, and I was telling the audience, I remember when we were doing these research and these studies on entrepreneurship, and you read about how people see a problem and then they, create this awesome solution, or, they see it and they seek to solve it. And I remember reading that and being like, how did they come up with that? And even when I was working for social entrepreneurs, even, in Morocco and Ghana, it always mystified me, and how people just see a problem and seek to solve it. But then, here I am with Point of Origin, and honestly, that's really what happened. And it didn't happen overnight, for sure. I mean, this has been a couple years in the works, and there's still a long way to go. But I think working with a problem, seeing a problem, having experienced that problem, asking questions, um, and forcing yourself to think critically about it, forcing yourself to be very self-aware about it, I think is the path that leads you to say, okay, what can I do in my position to address it? And that's a starting point, I think.
And to add on to that, I think another way to kind of shore up you getting passionate about something and coming up with a solution to it is also like, especially if you're at Santa Clara University, you have a ton of amazing resources around you, and investing time into creating relationships with your peers and faculty and all of these people who have come back and helped us a lot, have answered a lot of questions, have connected us to a lot of people who help us, like making sure to be intentional about those things. Like Lindsey and I did not know each other at Santa Clara, but we like got connected through Miller Center post-graduation, and now we're working together. So it's kind of like making sure that you're being intentional about forming those networks, because they really can come back and be really helpful when you're trying to do something independently.
Yeah, and I think, believing in yourself is a huge thing. Believing that you can do it, and obviously there's a lot of education and processes to go through to be for qualifications and what have you. But believing in yourself is a huge aspect of it, and giving yourself a little credit. And yeah, Marisa made a great point. Leveraging that network, the SU network, is awesome.
Well, it's great to hear that. Um, I think that first step of asking questions and thinking critically and really learning more about who you can include in your network is so crucial. And so, um, from that, what kind of networks would you recommend? What kind of questions would you recommend asking if students want to get involved in food supply chains? And how do they learn more about that topic in general?
Follow at Point of Origin Series on Instagram. Go to www.pointoforigin.co/thoughts. That's the first place. But in all seriousness, I think pick a food, like pick anything and just start looking it up. Look up where it comes from, who are the major producers, who are the major exporters, what challenges they face. Something Marisa and I talk about a lot is that, you would really not expect how many major issues intersect with our food in a very powerful way. And so I think even just picking a product, picking a supply chain and digging deep into it, you'll find there's lots of different branches and paths to go down. So I always think that's a good start.
And there's also just a lot of opportunities out there if you are the kind of person who likes to get on the ground too to do stuff. Like I started my experience in food. Well, I come from a family who's in agriculture for a long time, but after my freshman year of college, I went and woofed in Southern, which is worldwide organic farming in Southern Colorado. And there's the Forge Garden at SU, and a lot of other campuses have gardens available where you can go and just start learning about that. There's a lot of food-based classes where there are professors that are really well known in this. Like Chris Bacon did a lot to teach me about food. And there's just, there's CFIE. That's how I also got really into this too. So it's kind of like, look around you, because there always is, food touches people, like Lindsey said, in a lot of ways. And there's always a way to kind of dive into that a little bit more, whether it's coming to workers movements or whether it's actually working in a garden. There's lots of ways to get involved.
Yeah, food is definitely something that can bring people together, and it has a lot of popularity when you look at sort of the documentaries that are starting to pop up on Netflix and different streaming platforms. And I love the plug pointoforigin.co, but also with your docuseries, who would you love to have watch your docuseries? What is your target audience?
I think market opportunity wise, we're really looking at SVOD distributors, subscription video on demand, but in a more, in a less literal sense. I think, of course, it's nice to have people, and we're seeing a showing of people in terms of support that are interested in this subject and know context behind the subject. But we also want audience members who don't. I think that's the beauty of putting something like this out there, is helping give access to information to people who might not otherwise look it up or get that information. And I think that's at the core of why I started this.
Well, we just want to say that we're beyond excited to see the first episode, to see the docuseries, to see where it takes you in the world, and what you continue to learn and find out. So thank you so much, Marisa and Lindsey, for letting our viewers hear more about your project. You can find out more about the Point of Origin docuseries on their website, as well as their social media, their Instagram, and we will link those in the next slide. And if you would like to check out more Join Us at the Table episodes, you can find that on the CFIE website, which we will also link in the next slide. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks.
Hope you have a great rest of your day.